That looks pretty good. That hole there is where the steering box is located. And you can see these lines. That's where the frame is. That's going to hit. And the outside of that C-channel extension is here. So I will have to somehow incorporate some gusseting or something to hold the gearbox, the steering box on the inside of that C-channel. That shouldn't be too bad. I can work that out. The cab mount will fit directly on top of this on top of this flange. But that mount is quite wide. It's as wide as this is. So, and this is awfully thin metal. The rubber mount's made to go into about 1/2 inch thick material. This is only like 1/8. So I have to beef it up somehow. I might just put some plate on top, and that will raise the cab an additional 1/2 inch. That's okay. So put that on top. It'll rest on top. But still, do I have a cross member there as well? And then one in the front? Knowing that I still have that problem with the gearbox, with the steering box, which is about here. Yeah, anyways, lots of thinking to do. The plan will develop as the day proceeds. Well, I cut these bits off of the cross members that were between the bogies on the motorhome frame. That's why it's got such a wide flange here. And this actually started life in between these frame rails. And it's a pretty good fit. It's as tight as it ever was. So inside to inside is around 47.5 inches. And I've cut these to fit. Let's see how well I did. If these fit, then I can weld them together and then weld them in. And that should give me all the amount of room that I need for those cab mounts to work. Okay, I've got this piece welded together. I think I've got it. Thank goodness for long clamps. So I've got this spaced back, the same amount on both sides. I have this the same distance apart, front and rear. And I have it square, I believe. Pretty darn good. So I will tack weld this piece in place, and once it's all, I'll check it again, make sure, weld it all around, and then I can weld that piece in, and I can start boxing in this part. And I still have to decide what to do here, because the steering box will go about here. I have to put part of this flange out. The thing is, I'll probably be able to mount a bracket to this to hold the steering box because of the way it's made. That arm on it swings like this, and it's got to be pretty much pointed straight at that bell crank there. That bell crank will have to change. And I can kind of see why that frame piece, the bracket that it was bolted to before, is very heavy, and I can kind of see why. It was outboard and would have a lot of torque on it. It'd be wanting to move around. So hopefully with all this work I'm doing here, it'll be strong enough to hold the steering box and not wiggle and wobble around. And yeah. The other thing I've been looking at is I was thinking of putting the cab mounts directly on top of the frame. I don't have to. Here, all the way across, I can mount those mounts anywhere. The actual truck frame, the actual truck cab before was mounted about this far apart. Well, this far because it was offset. But yeah, the back ones were way inboard. They were only 25 inches apart. So really, I can put these anywhere, and I'm not going to lose anything on the cab. Good. I cut these pieces from the third last frame member on the motorhome. And there was a kind of a cutout there for the black water tank. And well, I figured why not use it. You can see there's kind of a step down there. And I had to use a gas torch, and which I couldn't get it very hot because it's only a butane torch. And then my anvil, and yeah, with enough hammering, I've cut a tab out here so it slots inside this one. And I think that'll look really good. I'll use a clamp to bring these in a bit. Good. Do that for the other side and I'll weld them up. The original frame ended about here, and I cut it off because it had some stuff I didn't want. The rear cab mount goes about here. The front cab mount goes here. That's a lot of weight on the front of this, but I think this is going to take it all right with this, the boxing that part of the frame. It should be rigid enough. I think the main part of the weight on that cab will be here because, you know, it goes all the way back beyond the back tire. And there will be some weight here, sure. Arguably, the front of the cab is heavier than the rear of the cab. But I'll have to deal with those issues as they occur. UPS just made a delivery. Delivered to my door from Cinnabar. They make a lot of new old stock things for GMC Motorhomes. 2 brand new air springs, airbags, whatever you want to call them. These are brand new. They're not new old stock. So I'll bolt them on there when I get a chance. I had to I had to smile when he's asking me when I was ordering these, what's the VIN number of your motorhome? Sorry, ain't no VIN number. I have one, but it's irrelevant. This ain't no motorhome. Anyways, I'll put these aside for now and bolt them on when I get a chance. Well, here's my marks for the where the cross member is in the cab. And let's see if I've got this level now. That looks pretty good. How about the other plane? So I'll make the other one the same height here and get it to be level like this, and I'll weld them in place. I know the frame is level, so to establish height, I can just use a ruler from the floor. 30 1/4. So it's 30 inches and 1/4 high off the ground. It's right where it needs to be for the frame member. That one's the same way. They're the same height. They're both level in all directions. We're good. We'll weld them in. I've finished welding. Everything is still square and level. I'm not the best welder in the world, but I think those will stick. And I've done some cleaning up of these welds and of these and all of those. The next thing I have to do is put in the front cab mounts. Now I marked, these 2 marks on the side are from the cross member in the cab. That line there is the center line, so I can be anywhere along that center line. And I'm thinking I'll probably mount it about here. Enough room for one of these bushings to fit comfortably. These are one of the washers that came off. You see they're a little bit bigger diameter. They were squished down on there pretty good, so I'll make it that big around at least. This material is only 1/8 of an inch. And without buying anything, this is off the fire truck, the heavy piece of angle iron. That's 1/4 of an inch thick. Well, together that's only 3/8. If I welded that flat down onto here, that's only 3/8 of an inch. So I have to use some more of the motorhome frame. That is pretty much off the same piece that I cut these off of originally. And they're the wide web here, wide flange here. I'll just be using the flanges or a portion of it. Clean up this weld a little bit so it gives me a square edge. I'll go out this direction, and so maybe half of this. Anyway, once I get this thinner piece welded down below here to be level with this then. That'll be level here, then I can cut that to shape. That'll be welded down here. And that'll be my strong portion to hold the body mount. And then, because I need to have access for the bolts on the body mounts in here, I'll probably do something like I did there. And it'll be from about here where the heavy bracket ends, going this way. And that'll be adequate support, I think. The cross member will be stronger, and the front of the cab will have adequate strength holding it up. All right, I've got my 4 pieces cut. Got everything cleaned up here. That'll fit like this. This is just the 1/8 inch piece. Got a bit of a, I have to tack it down there and then bend it down here so it's flat. I want to make sure it's flat across here, because the next piece to go on is this one, and that's going to overlap this part. That will give me my place to put my body mount right about here. I've remarked the center line of the cross member underneath the cab, and arbitrarily I've decided I'm just going to make this 5 inches from the edge, the outside of that frame rail. I don't trust myself at all to go ahead and drill this hole and expect it to line up with something over there. The first thing I'm going to do is go up underneath the cab. I had marked the outside of this frame rail and the inside on the cross member underneath the front mount there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure in 5 inches from the mark that I made, and right in the center, I'll drill those holes. It does a couple of things for me. It'll be a pilot hole. I'm just going to drill up straight through that cross member and straight through the floor. Those mounts, the bolts have to go somewhere. I have to access either the head or the nut. I'll probably have the heads, the bolt's going to be facing down. I still have to get into the floorboard in order to get a wrench on it. So I'll drill a pilot hole in that cross member, straight up through the floor, and on both sides. When I get that done, I'll go ahead and bring the cab back on. I'll line it up as I had before, and that'll do a couple of things for me. I can then, using that pilot hole in the cab, I can just drill straight through hopefully this little mark, these marks here. And the other thing it can do is I'll get the cab all leveled up again, side to side, fore and aft, and I'll measure down from the cross member that's about here to these mounts here, and I can make those cross members. It's heavy stuff, 1/4 inch. I'm going to mark in 5 inches from here. And that'll probably put it pretty close to where the other one is. But this is the outside. I'll measure in 5 inches, and I'll make the new hole there. Measure in 1.5 inches. That's my center. I was just taking a look to see what's in this area. It's about here where I'm drilling. But I noticed that this is all screwed down. That floor plate comes off. So I'm just going to take out those screws, pull up the floor plate, and I don't have to cut any holes in it at all. It's good to have access from all directions. Yes! Ooh, that's heavy. Okay. I've tried to turn the nut. I can get to it up here. The bolt head. I can't turn that. It's rusted into the bar. I can't push this out because the rubber is vulcanized to that bolt there. I've tried to cut them out, but all it does is you can see how this blade is all blued and stuff. It just overheats the blade and burns it up. So I have to cut that rubber off. And I'm here to tell you that is no fun. But I've cut it off before, and I can cut this one off too. It's just a lot of work. Quarter-inch thick. There's the bolt. Okay, now I can put the cab back over the frame and drill down from this hole. Well, that stinks. Missed my mark by a quarter of an inch. Well, after much horsing around, I've got the cab back in place over the top of the frame. The bottoms of the cab on the back are spread out. They're leaning outward. I don't know why, because I've got a spreader bar across there, and that used to be the same width. So something has changed in the meantime. But the cab itself is level based on, everything else I've tested. It's just that the sides of this have to be fixed later on independently. However, I've measured this many times. That wheel, that hub, is centered in this wheel well. It's to the outside of the tire, not that it matters, but on both sides it's 10.5 inches. To the front cab mount, I've got it held down by clamps because it took a while to get to this point. Inside that hole, you should be able to see a black line. That black line is what I'd predicted it was going to be lined up with. And now that's awful close. I was actually trying to line it up with this little hole. It's harder to see. But that black line is also inside there. You can just see the edge of it on that hole. That's where I wanted it to be. It doesn't mean where it's going to have to be. I will have to drill this pilot hole all the way through the frame here. And that'll tell me where to drill the big hole to mount the rubber bushing. This is one of the big washers that was originally on the cab. It was above and below the rubber donuts. I used that to mark around there. And I did that so that I could line up the bracket. This is one of the original brackets that came off the back cab mount. They used to be a little bit longer, and they were further inboard on this frame member here. So I've cut them to length. The cab is level. So when I cut this length, that's going to be where it's supposed to line up. And if I line that up there, it slides in up the top, almost. Line it up with those marks. That's actually level, perpendicular, and everything it needs to be. And the corners of the lower plate there, that actually lines up with the hole that's in the middle. So I'm going to have to tack these in, drill these holes here, all the way through the frame. So I have the pilot hole to drill the big hole for the rubber bushing. Moving right along. I measured the holes here. These are 2 inches, just under. And that's a little bit smaller than this, because this is 2, and the inside part here is 2 1/16 or something. It's going to be a press fit. I'll drill out these two and see if I can force those things in there. So those are done. I've given this a quick shot of paint. I tried to clean this with, I used a wire brush, brushed off all the stuff I could get to with that rotary brush. And I did some extra sanding, parts that were rough welds or just rough metal from whatever reason. And then I used some turpentine I blew it off first with an air hose, and then I used some spirits to try to wipe down, clean it up. And I tell you what, this frame, bits of it, this 46 years of accumulation of road grime. And no matter how long I tried, no matter rags I used, I got a pile of them over there, I could not get it clean. So I don't know if that paint's going to stick, but anyways, where it was bare metal, it should stick all right. I guess where it doesn't stick, that means there's paint there, so that's as good as it's going to get. The next step here is I have to put these rubber bushings in, and I think my chances are slim, but they're the same bushings. They would have always pressed in, but they're not going to go in easy. So yeah, wish me luck. Just using hand soap. You're joking, really? It goes in that easy? Yes! Oh, wonderful. I am shocked how well that went. Must be the paint. Especially knowing how hard it was to get these rubber bushings out in the first place when they were stuck. Well, not this much so much, but I just slipped right in. But in the truck cab, those were in there. So now all I have to do is drill a 5/8 inch hole in the front frame member of the cab and get the right bolts and then bolt the cab on. I'll probably not bolt the cab on. I'll probably just leave a bolt to locate it, because that cab's going to have to go on and off several more times while I figure out all the other stuff that's got to happen. Before I move the cab over, I wanted to show these. I've welded these mounts on here fairly solid. These are the rear cab mounts. And they're both in place. I've made angle brackets to fit here because it'll need some bolstering. Trouble is, these are both pretty solid. I'm not positive these holes are going to line up with the bushings I just put in on the frame. These don't line up close enough. This might be a bit of an issue. Well, we're going to stick the cab over and see how well I did. Oh boy. I had to pull it out a bit, but it fit, all 4 bolts. Let's take the chain hoist off and see what it looks like. Love it or hate it, that's where the cab is. That's its position. I'm pleased. It's good stuff. One of the viewers made a comment. He likes to, well, he wanted me to continue with cab wrestling. That's a good word, cab wrestling. That'll be all for this episode. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe. Give me a thumbs up. I'll see you next time.